Maya thought she had the perfect life, even if it wasn't fancy. She lived in a small cottage behind her husband Alex's family house with their twin daughters, Rose and Violet. The girls were 6 years old and full of energy, always running around, the garden, and asking a million questions about everything. Every morning, Maya would wake up early to make breakfast for her family. Alex would kiss her goodbye before heading off to work at his family's business. He never talked much about what he did there, just said he helped manage things for his parents. Maya didn't mind not knowing the details. She trusted Alex completely and figured business talk was boring anyway. Maya worked part-time at the local library 3 days a week. She loved being around books and helping people find stories they would enjoy. The job didn't pay much, but it was enough to help with groceries and the girls' clothes. Alex always said they had enough money to get by, and that was all that mattered to Maya. The cottage where they lived was cozy but simple. It had 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a living room where the whole family would watch movies together on Friday nights. Maya had decorated it with flowers from the garden and pictures the twins drew at school. It felt like home, even though Alex's mother, Helen, sometimes made comments about how cramped it looked. Helen and her husband, Richard, were difficult. They were the kind of people who had opinions about everything and weren't shy about sharing them. Helen would often stop by unannounced to check on things, always finding something to criticize. The cottage was too small, the girls were too loud, Maya's job at the library wasn't important enough, but Maya tried to stay positive. They were. Alex's parents, after all. Alex was different from his parents. He was kind and gentle, always making Maya laugh with his silly jokes. He would spend hours playing with Rose and Violet, building blanket forts and reading them bedtime stories. On weekends, they would go to the park or have picnics by the lake. Maya felt lucky to have found someone who loved their simple life as much as she did. The twins were Maya's whole world. Rose was the quiet one who loved drawing and could sit for hours with her coloring books. Violet was the opposite, always asking questions, always moving, always ready for an adventure. They both looked like Alex with their dark hair and bright eyes, but they had Maya's stubborn streak. Money was sometimes tight, but Maya made it work. She would shop at discount stores, cook meals from scratch, and find free activities for the girls. They didn't need expensive toys or fancy clothes to be happy. Family game nights, backyard camping trips, and homemade birthday cakes were enough. Alex sometimes seemed worried about money, but he would always tell Maya not to stress about it. "We have everything we need," he would say, pulling her close. "A roof over our heads, food on the table, and each other. What more could we want?" Maya would smile and agree, feeling grateful for their simple but happy life. Then everything changed on a Tuesday morning in March. Maya was getting the girls ready for school when she heard a loud crash from the kitchen. She rushed in to find Alex on the floor, clutching his chest and struggling to breathe. His face was pale and covered in sweat. Maya had never seen him look so scared. Call for help," Alex whispered, his voice barely audible. Maya's hands shook as she dialed for an ambulance while trying to keep the twins calm. Rose started crying, and Violet kept asking what was wrong with Daddy. Maya didn't know what to tell them. Alex was only 34 years old and had always been healthy. This couldn't be happening. The paramedics arrived quickly, but Maya could tell from their faces that something was seriously wrong. They worked on Alex in the ambulance while Maya followed behind in their old car, the twins crying in the back seat. At the hospital, doctors rushed Alex into surgery while Maya sat in the waiting room, holding her daughters and praying. After what felt like forever, a doctor came out with the worst news Maya had ever heard. Alex had suffered a massive heart attack. They had done everything they could, but it was too late. He was gone. Maya felt like the world had stopped spinning. How could Alex be dead? Just that morning, he had kissed her goodbye and promised to pick up milk on his way home from work. Now the girls would never see their father again, and Maya was all alone. The next few days were a blur of funeral arrangements, casseroles from neighbors and relatives Maya barely knew offering their condolences. Helen and Richard took care of most of the funeral details, which Maya was grateful for since she could barely think straight. The girls didn't really understand what had happened. They kept asking when Daddy was coming home. 1 week after the funeral, Helen knocked on Maya's door. Her face was cold and businesslike, nothing like the grieving grandmother Maya expected to see. "Maya, we need to talk," Helen said, stepping inside without being invited. "Richard and I have been going through Alex's papers, and I'm afraid there are some problems." Maya felt her stomach drop. "What kind of problems?" "Financial problems," Helen said bluntly. "Alex wasn't as responsible with money as we thought. There are debts, quite a lot of them actually. The business isn't doing well either. I'm afraid there's not much left." Maya stared at her mother-in-law in shock. Alex had never mentioned any money problems. Sure, they lived simply, but Maya thought that was by choice, not because they had to. "But what about the house?" Maya asked. "What about the cottage?" Helen's expression didn't change. "The cottage belongs to us, Maya. It always has. Alex never owned it, and I'm afraid we're going to need you and the girls to move out soon. We need to sell some property to pay off Alex's debts." The room started spinning. Maya sat down heavily, trying to process what she was hearing. "Move out? Where? Are we supposed to go?" "I'm sure you'll figure something out," Helen said, pulling an envelope from her purse. "This should help you get started. It's $5,000, all we can spare right now." Maya looked at the envelope like it was a snake. $5,000 to start over with 2 children and no real plan? How was she supposed to find a place to live, pay for deposits, buy furniture, and still keep food on the table? "I don't understand," Maya said, her voice breaking. "Alex never said anything about debts. He always said we had enough money." Helen sighed impatiently. "Alex was always too optimistic about money. He never wanted to worry you with the details. But the truth is, the business has been struggling for years. We tried to help him, but there's only so much we could do." "How long do we have?" Maya whispered. 2 weeks should be enough time to find somewhere else to go," Helen said, standing to leave. "I'm sorry, Maya, I really am. But we have to think about our own future now." After Helen left, Maya sat in her quiet cottage and cried harder than she had since Alex died. Not only had she lost her husband, but now she was losing her home, too. The girls came home from school to find their mother surrounded by tissues, and Maya had to explain that they would be moving to a new house soon. That night, after putting Rose and Violet to bed, Maya sat at her kitchen table with a notebook and tried to figure out how she was going to survive. $5,000 might cover a security deposit and first month's rent somewhere cheap, but then what? She would need to find a full-time job immediately, plus childcare for the girls, plus money for food and clothes and everything else. Maya had always been strong, but this felt impossible. She had never lived on her own before. She had gone straight from her parents' house to living with Alex. Now she was a single mother with no savings, no family support, and no idea how to start over. But looking at her sleeping daughters, Maya knew she had to try. Rose and Violet needed their mother to be strong, even when everything felt hopeless. Maya wiped her tears, made a cup of tea, and started looking through apartment listings in the cheapest part of town. Her perfect little life was over. But somehow she had to build a new one from the pieces that remained. Maya found a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in the oldest part of town. The paint was peeling, the carpet had stains she couldn't identify, and the kitchen faucet dripped constantly no matter how tightly she turned it off. But the rent was cheap, enough that she could afford it with her library salary, and that's all that mattered right now. Moving day was heartbreaking. The girls kept asking why they couldn't take their big toy chest or Maya's favorite reading chair. Maya had to explain that their new place was smaller and they could only bring the most important things. Rose cried when she realized her art table wouldn't fit, and Violet didn't understand why they had to leave their garden behind. The first night in their new home, all three of them slept in Maya's bed. The apartment felt so different from their cozy cottage. Instead of birds singing outside their window, they heard cars honking and neighbors arguing through thin walls. Maya lay awake wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. But Maya was determined to make things work. She painted the girls' bedroom a cheerful yellow using paint from the discount store. She hung their drawings on every wall and set up a reading corner with pillows from their old home. Slowly, the apartment started feeling less scary and more like theirs. The hardest part was money. Maya's part-time library job wasn't nearly enough to cover rent, groceries, and everything else they needed. She applied for full-time work at the library, but they said there weren't any openings. Maya spent hours filling out job applications, online, but most places wanted experience she didn't have. Finally, Maya found evening work at Tony's Diner downtown. The owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, was kind and understood that Maya needed flexible hours around her library schedule. Maya would work at the library from 9 to 3, pick up the girls from school, help them with homework, and then head to the diner from 6 to midnight. Those first few months were exhausting. Maya would get home after midnight, fall into bed for a few hours, then wake up early to get the girls ready for school. She was running on coffee and determination, but somehow she kept going. The girls were amazing. Rose and Violet never complained about their smaller room or the fact that they couldn't afford new clothes very often. They learned to entertain themselves while Maya worked her second job, doing homework at the diner's corner booth and coloring quietly while she served customers. Maya often skipped meals to make sure there was enough food for Rose and Violet. She would tell them she had eaten at work, but really she was just drinking coffee and trying to ignore her empty stomach. The girls were growing so fast, and Maya wanted to make sure they had proper nutrition, even if she had to go without. Some nights, after putting the girls to bed, Maya would sit at their tiny kitchen table and cry from exhaustion. She would look at their bills and wonder how she was going to make everything work. The electric bill, the rent, groceries, gas for their old car that was always breaking down. It never seemed to end. 3 years passed this way. 3 years of working 2 jobs, counting every penny, and trying to give Rose and Violet as normal a childhood as possible. The girls were 9 now, and sometimes they would ask questions that broke Maya's heart. "Mom, why can't we visit Grandma Helen and Grandpa Richard anymore?" Rose asked one day while they were walking home from school. Maya had practiced answering this question, but it still hurt every time. "Sometimes families grow apart, sweetheart. It's not anyone's fault, it just happens." "But they were Daddy's parents," Violet said. "Don't they want to see us?" Maya squeezed their hands tighter. How could she explain to 9-year-old girls that their grandparents had kicked them out right after their father died? How could she tell them about the cruel things Helen had said, or the way Richard wouldn't even look at them during the funeral? "People deal with sadness in different ways," Maya said carefully. "Grandma and Grandpa are still very sad about Daddy, and sometimes that makes it hard for them to spend time with us." The girls seemed to accept this explanation, but Maya could see they missed having grandparents. All their friends had grandmas who baked cookies and grandpas who told funny stories. Rose and Violet just had Maya, working herself to exhaustion, trying to be everything they needed. One evening, Violet came home with a school project about family history. She was supposed to make a family tree and write about her relatives. Maya's heart sank as she realized how empty their family tree would look. Just her, Alex, and the girls, with no mention of grandparents who had abandoned them. "Can you tell me more about Daddy?" Violet asked, spreading her poster board on their kitchen table. "I want to write about what he did for work and stuff." Maya realized she didn't know much about Alex's work. He had always said he helped manage the family business, but what exactly did that mean? She decided to look online for some information that might help with Violet's project. Maya opened her old laptop and searched for Alex's name. She thought she might find his obituary or maybe some mention of the family business. What she found instead made her hands shake. The first result was an article from a business magazine dated just 2 years ago. The headline read, "Local Manufacturing Empire Continues Growth Under Young Leadership." There was a photo of Alex standing in front of a large factory, wearing a suit Maya had never seen before. Maya read the article 3 times, not believing what she was seeing. It talked about Alex as the owner and CEO of Chen Industries, a manufacturing company worth millions of dollars. It mentioned several factories, patents for innovative products, and plans for expansion into international markets. This can't be right, Maya whispered to herself. If Alex owned a multi-million-dollar company, why were they living in a tiny cottage? Why was Maya working part-time at a library? Why had Helen said there were debts and no money left? Maya kept searching, her heart pounding harder with each new discovery. She found business registration documents listing Alex as the primary owner of not just one company, but several. There were real estate holdings, investment accounts, and patent applications all in Alex's name. One article from a trade publication showed Alex receiving an award for innovative business leadership in manufacturing. The photo showed him shaking hands with the mayor, smiling proudly. Maya stared at her husband's face, looking for some sign of the man she thought she knew. "Mom, are you okay?" Rose asked, appearing beside Maya's chair. "You look upset." Maya quickly closed the laptop. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just looking up some information for Violet's project." But Maya wasn't fine. Her mind was spinning with questions and a growing sense of betrayal. If Alex had been wealthy, why had he hidden it from her? Why had they lived so simply? And most importantly, where was all that money now? Maya waited until the girls were asleep before opening her laptop again. She spent hours reading every article, every business filing, every mention of Alex's name she could find. The picture that emerged was shocking. Alex hadn't just worked for his family's business, he had been the business. Everything was in his name. According to the most recent article Maya could find, Chen Industries was valued at over $200 million. $200 million. Maya had to read that number several times to make sure she wasn't imagining it. Maya thought about Helen's words after Alex died. There are debts. Quite a lot of them, actually. The business isn't doing well. There's not much left. But all the evidence Maya was finding suggested exactly the opposite. The business had been thriving right up until Alex's death. As the sun started coming up, Maya sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and tried to make sense of everything. Alex had been worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but somehow Helen and Richard had convinced her there was nothing left. They had given her $5,000 and kicked her out like she was some kind of charity case. Maya felt angry, confused, and heartbroken all at the same time. Angry that Alex had lied to her for their entire marriage. Confused about why he would hide such wealth from his own family. And heartbroken that her children had been living in poverty when their father had left them enough money to be secure for the rest of their lives. But underneath all those emotions was something else: determination. If Alex had really left all that money behind, then Rose and Violet deserved their inheritance. Maya might not understand why Alex had kept secrets, but she wasn't going to let her children suffer because of lies and family greed. Maya looked around their tiny apartment, at the peeling paint, the second-hand furniture, the stack of bills on her counter, and made a decision. She was going to find out exactly what had happened to Alex's money. And if Helen and Richard had stolen what belonged to her daughters, Maya was going to fight to get it back. For the first time in 3 years, Maya felt something other than exhaustion and worry. She felt hope. Maybe their struggle was finally going to end. Maybe Rose and Violet would get the security their father had intended them to have. Maya didn't know how she was going to prove what had happened, but she was determined to try. Her girls deserved the truth, and Maya wasn't going to stop until she found it. Maya knew she needed help, but lawyers were expensive and she barely had enough money for groceries. She spent her lunch breaks at the library, researching attorneys online, reading reviews and trying to figure out who might take her case seriously. Most of the good lawyers charged consultation fees she couldn't afford. Finally, Maya found a law office that offered free initial consultations. The lawyer was Catherine Walsh, a woman in her 50s who had built her reputation fighting for families who had been wronged. Maya called and scheduled an appointment, her hands shaking as she explained her situation over the phone. "Bring everything you've found," Catherine told her. "Every document, every article, every piece of evidence you can gather." Maya spent the weekend printing out everything she had discovered about Alex's business empire. The stack of papers was 3 inches thick by the time she was done. Rose and Violet watched curiously as their mother organized documents at their kitchen table. "What are all those papers for, Mom?" Rose asked. "I'm trying to find out more about your daddy's work," Maya said carefully. She hadn't told the girls about her discovery yet. She wanted to be sure before getting their hopes up. Catherine's office was in a tall building downtown that made Maya feel small and out of place. The elevator was fancier than any Maya had ever been in, and the waiting room had leather chairs and expensive-looking art on the walls. Maya clutched her folder of documents and tried not to feel intimidated. When Catherine called her into the office, Maya was surprised by how warm and approachable the lawyer seemed. She was nothing like the cold, intimidating attorneys Maya had imagined. Catherine offered her coffee and asked about Rose and Violet before getting down to business. "Tell me everything," Catherine said, settling back in her chair. Maya started from the beginning. Alex's sudden death, Helen and Richard's claim that there was no money left, the forced move from their cottage, and finally her shocking discovery about Alex's wealth. Catherine listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes. When Maya finished her story, Catherine leaned forward with interest. "May I see the documents you brought?" For the next hour, Catherine reviewed every piece of paper Maya had printed. Her expression grew more serious with each page she read. Finally, she looked up at Maya with a mixture of anger and determination. "Maya, I have to tell you something that's going to be hard to hear," Catherine said gently. "Based on what you've shown me, I believe your in-laws have committed several serious crimes. They've stolen from you and your children, and they've lied to cover it up." Maya felt her heart racing. "What do you mean?" Catherine pulled out several of the business documents. "Look at these incorporation papers. Alex owned these companies outright. There's no mention of his parents having any ownership stake. And look at this will from the county records. Alex left everything to you and the girls." "But Helen said there were debts," Maya protested. "She said the business was failing." Catherine's expression darkened. "I'm going to request financial records for all of Alex's companies. I suspect we're going to find that they were very profitable right up until his death. The question is, where did all that money go?" Over the next few weeks, Catherine worked like a detective. She filed legal requests for bank records, business documents, and property transfers. What she discovered made Maya sick to her stomach. "They started moving money the day after Alex died," Catherine explained during their next meeting. "Look at these bank transfers. Millions of dollars were moved from Alex's business accounts into accounts controlled by Helen and Richard." Maya stared at the bank statements in disbelief. "How is that even possible? Wouldn't they need permission or something?" "They forged documents," Catherine said, her voice tight with anger. "They created fake powers of attorney, making it look like Alex had given them control of his finances before he died. They even backdated some of the paperwork." Maya felt dizzy. "So all this time, while I've been working 2 jobs and barely keeping food on the table, they've been living off money that belonged to my daughters?" "Exactly," Catherine confirmed. "And it gets worse. They also transferred ownership of several properties into their names, including 2 vacation homes and a commercial building downtown. properties that should belong to you and the girls. Catherine explained that they would need to go to court to get Maya's money back. It wouldn't be easy. Helen and Richard had hired expensive lawyers and were claiming that Alex had verbally promised them the businesses would stay in the family. "They're going to try to paint you as someone who married Alex for his money," Catherine warned. "They'll say you didn't even know about his wealth, so how can you claim it now?" "But that's exactly my point," Maya said, frustrated. "I didn't know about the money. If I was some kind of gold digger, wouldn't I have known my husband was rich?" Catherine smiled. "That's going to be one of our strongest arguments." The legal process was slow and stressful. Maya had to miss work to attend depositions where Helen and Richard's lawyers asked her hundreds of questions, trying to find holes in her story. They were cold and aggressive, treating Maya like she was the criminal instead of the victim. During one particularly brutal session, Helen and Richard's lawyer accused Maya of lying about not knowing Alex's wealth. "Isn't it convenient," he sneered, "that you suddenly discovered your husband's fortune right when you needed money?" Maya felt tears stinging her eyes, but Catherine had prepared her for this. "I discovered it by accident while helping my daughter with a school project," Maya said firmly. "If I had known Alex was wealthy, don't you think I would have asked questions when his parents told me there was no money left?" The worst part was when Helen took the witness stand. Maya's former mother-in-law sat there looking dignified and sorrowful, telling the court how much she and Richard had loved Alex, and how they were just trying to protect the family business from someone who didn't understand its importance. "Alex always planned for the business to stay in the family," Helen testified, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "He talked about it all the time. Maya was a sweet girl, but Alex knew she wasn't interested in business matters. He wanted to make sure his life's work would continue." Maya wanted to scream. Helen was lying so smoothly, making it sound like she was the caring grandmother, just looking out for everyone's best interests. But Catherine had warned Maya this would happen. During cross-examination, Catherine was relentless. She questioned Helen about the forged documents, the suspicious timing of the money transfers, and the way Maya and the girls had been treated after Alex's death. "Mrs. Chen," Catherine said, "if Alex really wanted you to control his businesses, why didn't he include that in his legal will? Why does his will specifically leave everything to his wife and children?" Helen looked uncomfortable for the first time. "Wills can be incomplete. They don't always reflect someone's true wishes." "But forged powers of attorney do," Catherine shot back. The trial dragged on for months. Maya felt like her whole life was on display, with strangers judging every decision she had made. The stress was overwhelming, and she could see it affecting Rose and Violet, too. They kept asking why Mommy was always going to meetings, why she seemed so tired and worried all the time. Maya tried to explain without getting their hopes up too much. "Remember how Daddy used to work at his family's business? Well, it turns out the business was more important than we realized, and now some grown-ups are arguing about it in court." "Are we going to get more money?" Violet asked with the blunt curiosity of a 10-year-old. "I don't know, sweetheart," Maya said honestly. "But I'm trying to make sure we get what Daddy would have wanted us to have." The breakthrough came when Catherine's investigation uncovered something Helen and Richard hadn't expected anyone to find. Hidden in Alex's personal files was a safety deposit box that Maya didn't know existed. When they opened it with a court order, they found journals, letters, and most importantly, a detailed business plan Alex had written just weeks before his death. In his own handwriting, Alex had laid out his plans for the future. He wanted to tell Maya about their wealth on their 10th wedding anniversary, which would have been just 2 months after he died. He had been planning to surprise her with the financial security that would let her quit her library job and pursue her dream of writing children's books. There were also house plans. Alex had been secretly designing a beautiful family home, where Maya and the girls would have everything they could ever want. He had written about his excitement over finally sharing his success with the family he loved so much. Maya stared at the number on the bank statement that Catherine handed her. $200 million. Even after all the legal fees and court costs, she was now worth more money than she had ever imagined existed. She read the number 3 times to make sure she wasn't dreaming. "It's real, Maya," Catherine said with a smile. "You and the girls are officially millionaires." But Maya didn't feel like celebrating yet. The money came with so many complicated emotions that she didn't know where to start processing them. She felt angry at Alex for keeping such a huge secret from her. She felt guilty about all the years Rose and Violet had gone without things they could have easily afforded, and she felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of managing such enormous wealth. The first thing Maya did was quit both her jobs. After 4 years of working herself to exhaustion, walking away from Tony's diner and the library felt strange. Mrs. Rodriguez hugged her tightly when Maya explained she was leaving. "You deserve all the good things coming your way, mija," Mrs. Rodriguez said with tears in her eyes. "You worked harder than anyone should have to." Maya's co-workers at the library were shocked when she told them she wouldn't be coming back. She had been so private about her legal battle that none of them knew what she had been going through. Maya simply told them that some family financial issues had been resolved, and she was taking time to figure out her next steps. The hardest conversation was with Rose and Violet. Maya had kept them mostly in the dark about the legal battle, not wanting to get their hopes up or burden them with adult problems. Now, she had to explain that their lives were about to change completely. "Girls, I need to tell you something important about Daddy," Maya said one evening after dinner in their tiny apartment. They were sitting on the worn couch that had come with the place, and Maya realized it might be the last conversation they'd have in this cramped little home. Rose and Violet looked at their mother expectantly. At 10 years old, they had learned to read Maya's moods pretty well, and they could tell something big was coming. "You know how Daddy worked for his family's business?" Maya began carefully. "Well, it turns out the business was much bigger than I knew. Daddy actually owned several companies, and they were very successful." "Does that mean Daddy was rich?" Violet asked with her typical directness. Maya took a deep breath. "Yes, sweetheart. Daddy was very wealthy, and he left all of that money to us, to you and Rose and me." The girls looked at each other, then back at their mother. "So we don't have to live here anymore?" Rose asked quietly. She had never complained about their small apartment, but Maya knew she missed having her own space. "We can live anywhere we want," Maya said, feeling emotional. "We can have a big house with a yard, and you can have your own rooms, and we can buy books and art supplies and anything else you need." For a moment, the girls were quiet, processing this information. Then Violet asked the question Maya had been dreading. "Why didn't Daddy tell us he was rich?" Maya had thought about this question for months, and she still didn't have a perfect answer. "I think Daddy wanted to wait until you were older to explain about money and business. He loved our simple life together, and maybe he was worried that knowing about the money would change things." "Are we going to change now?" Rose asked, sounding worried. Maya pulled both girls close to her. "We're going to have more opportunities and fewer worries about paying bills. But we're still the same. Family. We still love each other the same way. Money can't change that." House hunting with $200 million was a completely different experience than apartment hunting with $5,000. Real estate agents fought to show Maya the most expensive properties in town. They showed her mansions with bowling, alleys, estates with their own lakes, and penthouses with views of the entire city. But Maya found she wasn't interested in the flashiest options. She wanted a home that felt warm and welcoming, not a museum they'd be afraid to touch. After looking at dozens of properties, Maya found the perfect house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. It was a beautiful colonial-style home with 4 bedrooms, a big kitchen perfect for family dinners, and a backyard with old oak trees and space for a garden. There was a cozy library nook where Maya could read, and the girls each had their own bedroom with enough space for all their books and toys. "This feels like home," Rose said when they walked through it for the second time. "Can we get a dog?" Violet asked, looking out at the big yard. Maya laughed. "We can definitely get a dog." Moving into their new house was exciting but also overwhelming. Maya let the girls pick out their own furniture and decorations, and they spent weeks turning their new rooms into perfect spaces for 10-year-old girls. Rose chose soft blues and filled her room with art supplies and easels. Violet went with bright greens and created a reading corner with bean bags and shelves for her growing book collection. But having money also created problems Maya hadn't expected. Suddenly, everyone seemed to have opinions about how she should spend it. Distant relatives she hadn't heard from in years started calling with sob stories and requests for loans. Investment advisors bombarded her with emails about opportunities she didn't understand. Even some of her old friends started acting differently around her, either being overly nice or seeming resentful. Maya realized she needed help managing her new wealth responsibly. Catherine recommended a financial advisor named David Thompson, who specialized in helping families who had suddenly come into money. David was patient and honest, helping Maya understand her options without trying to pressure her into risky investments. "The most important thing," David explained, "is to make sure your daughter's futures are secure. Everything else is just details." Together, they set up trust funds for Rose and Violet that would pay for their education and provide them with financial security for life. Maya also decided to use some of the money to help other people who were struggling the way she had. She started by donating $20 million to create scholarships for single parents who wanted to go back to school. Maya remembered how impossible it had seemed to pursue her dream of writing when she was working 2 jobs just to survive. She wanted other parents to have opportunities she hadn't had. Maya also donated $10 million to food banks and programs. That helped families pay for basic necessities. She had never forgotten the nights she went to bed hungry so Rose and Violet could have full bellies, and she wanted to make sure other parents didn't have to make that choice. But perhaps most importantly, to Maya, she used $15 million to start a foundation in Alex's name that funded heart disease research. She couldn't bring Alex back, but maybe she could help prevent other families from losing someone they loved to sudden heart attacks. The foundation work gave Maya a sense of purpose she hadn't expected. She spent time learning about different research programs, meeting with doctors and scientists, and hearing from other families who had lost loved ones to heart disease. It was emotional work, but it felt meaningful in a way that just spending money on herself never could. As the girls started 5th grade in their new school district, Maya watched them adjust to their changed circumstances. They were still the same kids. Rose was still quiet and artistic. Violet was still energetic and curious, but they had a confidence now that came from feeling secure. "Mom," Violet said one evening while they were having dinner in their bright, spacious kitchen, "do you think Daddy would be happy about our new house?" Maya looked around at their beautiful home, at her daughters who were healthy and safe and full of possibilities, and felt Alex's presence strongly. "I think Daddy would be very happy," she said. "This is exactly what he wanted for us." Maya had also made peace with some of her anger toward Alex for keeping secrets. Reading through his journals, which had been found in the safety deposit box, she began to understand his perspective. Alex had grown up wealthy, but had seen how money sometimes corrupted people or created problems in families. He had wanted to give Maya and the girls a normal childhood first, then gradually introduce them to their financial possibilities. His plan had been to tell Maya everything on their 10th anniversary, just 2 months after he actually died. He had written pages about his excitement over finally sharing his success with the family he adored. He had planned to show Maya the house designs, take the girls to see the companies they would inherit someday, and explain how they could use their wealth to help others. 1 year after winning their legal battle, Maya made a decision that surprised everyone who knew her. She decided to go back to school to study business management. She wanted to understand the companies Alex had built, and maybe even help run them someday.